I want to thank you for joining us on this session on self-care as we work through this information. As chaplains, I'm a chaplain with San Diego Fire Rescue and a number of law enforcement and medical examiner. But here's what I want all of us to realize as chaplains. Studies have shown that there's some commonality, whether hospital chaplain, police chaplain, emergency services, there's common personality traits where tend to be action-oriented, risk-taker, need to be needed, family-oriented. You're a helper. You want to help people, support people in times of need, difficulty saying no. When someone needs help, you volunteer. And all of these are good. In fact, I'm describing probably many of you. That's why you're here. You want to help. You want to be trained to help, come alongside people, support, provide compassion, empathy. So these are all good things. But the reality is sometimes these have liabilities. When you have a difficulty saying no, you tend to not have good boundaries. And so you can give and give and give. It's what I call the sinkhole syndrome, the sinkhole, you know, where under the surface there's a little leak in a pipe and it pulls away the sand and then the gravel and then the rocks and then the boulders, and all of a sudden the surface gives way and everything caves in, where no one saw all the compromise of what was going on, the potential of burnout, compassion fatigue. You know, I was called to assist a family. Their 3-year-old was lost in a house fire. He was supposed to be taking a nap and he was playing with matches in his bedroom. And family was outside talking with neighbors. They saw smoke coming out, called 911. They couldn't get in time. He had passed away and the family had asked me to come alongside the family. It was in North County from where we are here in San Diego. So I connected with the family. I helped facilitate, did the memorial service, and just connected with the family real well, providing support. Emotionally, just, a real heavy service. There was about 400 people to support the family. They had a video of his life. It was just so beautiful. The fire, the responding fire crew came to the memorial service. It was beautiful. Well, fast forward a year later, the family had contacted me if I could do a special service with them. Now, let me explain the context. I had been doing some international ministry. I'd been out of the country several times, and I've been traveling, and I was doing a little too much, so I took some time off, and I had blocked out a day upon my return from overseas that my family, we're going to have a family day and just be together as a family and have lunch and dinner and all of us together. And so when I, got back, this family contacted me, and the city they were in had, the city council had brought together some money to dedicate a bench in a park where he would play. And it was also fire prevention, and so they were doing a big thing for the community. And the mayor and all the officials were going to be there, and they asked me to come and pray a prayer and then share some encouragement to the community. And so the family calls me, would you do this? And they gave me the date, and it was the date I had committed for a family time. And so, what do you do? I prayed, and Lord, what would you have me do? And I felt convicted that I needed this time with my family. And I said no. And I knew another chaplain in the area, and so I connected them so they could follow up and have someone do the service. After I hung up on the phone, I'll tell you, I felt so guilty. It was like, what kind of pastor are you? You're going to go hang out with your family when there's need and bringing hope to a community. And I was there with them through this process. So you wrestle with the guilt, but I was doing what I believed was right. Well, a week after the service, I get a call from the family thanking me for the chaplain I had connected. They had lost touch with him and didn't realize it, but He was the pastor that actually dedicated little Stevie as a baby 3 years earlier, and they had lost touch with him. And it was kind of like God showing me, you know, I think I got this. I think we can do that, but it's important to know those priorities. So we're going to look at these elements of self-care. Now, some of the challenges in dealing as chaplains, we're dealing with strong emotion, kind of crisis-driven, you're kind of public scrutiny. You need to live above reproach, especially in some of the public agencies. You're being watched, and so it's important. Your ethics have to be always maintaining how you deal with life. And there's times I'm going through difficult times, and I could be upset about things, but I have to realize I'm here for them. And so I keep my guard up. Even though I want to be vulnerable and real, I'm not going to be complaining and all of that to where it's like, oh, how's he supposed to help us? You know, he's pretty messed up. So it's a balance between being vulnerable, transparent, but also ethical, and the standard that I'm here for people. The public scrutiny, knowing that one mistake will outweigh 1,000 good. So sometimes in ministry, we're the object of people's criticism. You know, it's kind of like this cartoon. What makes you think I've got problems with my staff? You know, kind of that target. Or Gary Larson had the old cartoon, you know. Bummer of a birthmark, Hal. You know, we're the target sometimes of people's emotion. And sometimes when people are in duress, their emotion can come out. And if you're there representing God as a chaplain, not necessarily preaching at people, that's not what I'm saying, but just who you are, as representing a sense that of God being there. Sometimes people have issues, and when you show up, the emotion sets in. One instance, there was a suicide, and brought in to assist the dad. His son had taken his life. And, you know, our chaplain is here, and the dad looked right at me and said, "Get off of my property." Well, what do you do in that moment? You walk right up to him and said, "You know, your son, it's probably your fault." And, no, you don't do that. No, you respect the heart and the wishes there. Walk across the street. And the best I could do is pray, and then offer the emergency responders resources to try to help this father. I mean, there's tons of situations you come into where you're that object. Now there's also a danger of thinking you're the hero, you're the rescuer. It's kind of the Messiah complex. Now this will help all of you, and those also in this course. You know, it's thinking you're the Iron Man. Well, if you think you're the Iron Man, this is the picture to keep in your mind, okay? There's the Iron Man competition. Of course, this is just for fun. But here's what I want you to do. As you're watching this video, and those sitting here, I want you to think of some of the stresses in your life. Go ahead, write them down. It could be a financial pressure. It could be a health issue, family situation, work situation, ministry. Dealing with maybe aging parents. You're in school perhaps. You have certain terms or papers, final exams. What are some of the pressures? Now, even as you're writing this, it's kind of like this optical illusion. As you see this, if I told you, I want you to look at the black dots. When you look at them, they're moving around, you know. That's how stress is at times. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm just driving on the freeway, my mind's somewhere else, but something's just kind of gnawing at me. Something's bothering me. And then I zero in, it's like, what's bothering me? And I realize, oh, it's this conversation, or it's this thing that's due, and it's kind of a pressure. And we have those that are sometimes adding up. Now, generally for most people, the greatest pressures are going to be people pressures. It's either work, home, or financial pressures related. But, you know, a lot of times our top pressures if I said, what are the current stresses in your life, it's going to be life. Now, one or two of you may have identified a traumatic event that just happened recently. It was a car accident or a loss of a loved one. You know, what's hard is we're dealing just with life in general, and then these traumatic events come crashing into our life, the cumulative stress elements that add to everything else. Then you as chaplains add a whole nother dimension, which is vicarious trauma, where you're exposed to the emotions and the pains of others that can impact us, emotionally engage us. Vicarious trauma, as defined here, is defined as the transformation that occurs within a trauma worker as a result of sympathetic engagement with clients' trauma experiences and their sequel or condition. It's their hardship, I emotionally connect with it, and then it affects me. Now I'm going to show you a traumatic picture. Now I'm going to explain this. And I'm not going to put you through this, but I'm just going to explain. This is humorous. It is not meant to be a real picture. So I'm going to show you a funny picture. But with law enforcement, fire and police, I work with them in the field of trauma. And sometimes they'll say, I'm going to show you a picture of someone who fell from a very high place and landed, and the inside of their body is now outside of their body, okay? And that they didn't survive. No, this is just a joke. I'm not really going to do that. And then I put this picture up, okay? Okay. Humpty Dumpty fell. Now, with police and fire, you know, sometimes I'll prep them and say, okay, I'm going to show you a traumatic picture. Someone fell from a high place. The inside of their body is now outside of their body. And so if you don't want to see this picture, just turn away, avert your eyes. Now, whenever I do that, emergency responders are like, you know, bring it on. They you know, they don't care. And then you show them, and it's like, no, honestly, as regular citizens, who would want to look at something like that? All of us should avert our eyes, but there's a curiosity. And I found in my chaplaincy role, like probationary firefighters or first-year police officers, you know, they arrive on scenes. It's a horrific scene that they're going to go into. They're aware of what they're walking into. They've been prepped ahead of time. And some of the younger officers or responders, some of the older guys or gals will say, hey, do you want to go in and look? Probationary, they're like, yeah, they go in and look. It's like, oh, ooh. The longer in the career, they'll say, hey, do you want to go in and look? They don't, generally, you'll hear, no, I'm good. I've seen enough. I don't need to see more. So how do we balance all of that? Those images, those emotions, those experiences. So in the research, we have what's called vicarious traumatization. It's also sympathetic PTSD. Compassion fatigue is one of the most common terms, and a lot of the research uses different terms, but it's really an analysis of these same elements. My PhD, actually, my dissertation years ago, was looking at compassion fatigue of pastors and the emotional drain in ministry and giving of themselves emotionally. How does that affect their relationships at home? And very strong correlations that the emotionally drained pastor, it correlates to a struggling family relationships, even marriage challenges. And so it's a very real issue that we're looking at. Now, there is in the research what is called compassion fatigue. In fact, here's a link on the PowerPoint that you have that you can take that assesses burnout, compassion fatigue, but also something called compassion satisfaction. Now, this assessment is designed for those who primarily are in emergency services. Let me explain. Compassion fatigue is that emotional drain. Burnout is a little more serious. It's where, you know, I need help and I get help, but I'm still not recovering. And we'll talk about that in a moment. What's compassion satisfaction? In the field of trauma or as chaplains, compassion satisfaction is something you actually need to be able to deal with trauma. It's that ability to compartmentalize the emotion where you have compassion for the hurt, but you don't own it yourself. In fact, you respond to people and you're helping others, you actually are benefited, you get invigorated. I had a call, we had fires a number of years ago, and some out of our city, out of our town, firefighters were dispatched to help wildland fires that had spread throughout our county. As a result, one of the firefighters was hospitalized from another city who they thought he had meningitis. He was diagnosed with meningitis, was in the hospital, went into a coma. Later, through some of the tests and everything, they found out that he had actually breathed in during the fires an amoeba spore that went into his brain and multiplied. It was misdiagnosed. They could have treated it if they had diagnosed it early enough, but now this was at the very end of his life. Their chief called our chief, do you have a chaplain to be with the family? So I'm at the hospital, didn't know them, they were from out of the city, but I built a relationship. I'm there with the family, bringing comfort. A couple firefighter friends were there, and their teenage son, their teenage daughter were saying goodbye to their dad. He's in a coma, probably a couple hours left, and his father was a retired firefighter and his wife were there saying goodbye to their son. You can imagine the emotion in this room. My role is to provide leadership, comfort, care, support, next steps, and so I'm praying for the family. They had a Christian faith, and so I was able to read scripture that was relevant. And finally, after a few hours, he passed away. The emotions that was there, they said goodbye. The hospital staff started preparing them for choosing the mortuary and next steps that they have. So now it's about 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, the family leaves. I'm the last to leave the room. Pray for everyone one last time. I'm driving home that night, of course, physically tired. And then I notice I had this like invigoration, energized. Now, what I'm not saying is, I was not driving home saying, well, that was fun. That's not what I'm saying. But I felt so honored to be able to be there at that time to give and support this family, helping others. You get this sense of satisfaction. It's like, what a privilege. And I realized I am made for this. I'm made for this. Now, my wife, not so much. She's very sympathetic. And someone will come to her and they're going through a difficult time. They're telling their story. It's very emotional. She loses it. She's crying to the point where they're coming alongside her saying, Karen, we're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. She's an intercessor. She prays. When she prays, she weeps. She feels the burden, the pain of people. I took her along once. There was a memorial service. I was filling in for another pastor. He got sick. It was an individual who had passed away. She was in her 90s. It was a great aunt of a church member. Pastor called me last minute. I'm sick. Could you fill in for me? The family knows you. And so I show up at this chapel. It's a mortuary. It's probably 20 people. They share memories and different aspects. And my wife and I were going out of town, so she was with me. And so she's sitting in the back of the chapel and trying to comfort the family. I give a message of hope. And at the end, we pray, we say our goodbyes, and I get into the car ready to go out of town for a kind of a weekend getaway. And the endorphins are coming in, I'm feeling rested, and I look over at my wife, her makeup's all smeared. She'd been crying through the service. I was like, honey, what happened? What? She goes, I feel so bad for their pain. I go, honey, you didn't even know them. She was 90 years old, that happens. She goes, that's it. I'm not going to another funeral. And she said, if you die, I'm not going. I was like, oh, great, thanks. That, made me feel like, now what is everyone going to think? My wife doesn't even come to my funeral. But it was like her emotional engagement. She can't separate the feelings of what others are feeling. Now, we'll talk about that here. The difference between pragmatism, sympathy, and empathy. Now, you can define them differently. The definition of empathy and sympathy sometimes get interchanged. So it's not so much the word I want to focus on. It's the concept. Okay, so let me explain here that empathy, in our term, now you could switch these terms, I understand. But let's call empathy as where you have compassion for the hurt and pain of another. You understand the compassion, you understand their hurt, you have compassion for them, but you don't feel what they're feeling. You don't own it for yourself. I would define sympathy as where you have compassion, but you're feeling, like my wife, you feel the pain of what they're feeling. And you take that with you. Now, if you're overly sympathetic, it's going to eventually impact you, the emotion. Now, I can go in and out of that experience. I got called to help a family. They had twin daughters, 8 years old, and there was a car, one of them was struck in a crosswalk, and they're at the hospital. I'm our emergency line at our ministry. I go to the hospital, but it happened that day I was doing a memorial service for a 7-year-old who had died of leukemia. I'd already started getting my suit on and realized, okay, I could go to the hospital, be with the family, pray with them, support them, and then make it to North County where I was doing a memorial service. And so I go to the hospital, precious young lady, a girl, she had run ahead of the parents, car didn't see her, got struck. She was in a coma and hit very severely. She subsequently survived. I always want to share the good end of the story, but she was in a coma for over a week. I'm there with the family, and as soon as I got there, we're about to pray, the physician came in, the attending physician, wanted to update them. So the family kind of stepped aside. So I'm standing by the bed of this precious little girl, and I'm praying for her. And at the time, I have twins. My 8-year-old daughter had the same hair color. And I was thinking, what if this was my girl? And my emotion started to well up, but I chose not to engage it. I stepped out of that. I'm here for them. Took a deep breath, and then the parents re-engaged. I prayed, there to comfort, help them with support, getting other friends and family, getting meals going. Made a couple phone calls. I left. Subsequent went back several times to be with them. Well, I get in my car, I'm driving on the freeway, and I'm starting to think about the memorial service of this 7-year-old, and thinking of this family. Now my twin son was 8 years old at the time. I was thinking, what if this was my son? And I had walked with this family through this process. They were involved in our children's ministry, and just a wonderful family, but just the emotion of what they've been through, the grief, their loss. And I'm driving on the freeway thinking of their pain. What if it was my son? And I just got welled up with emotion, and I let it go. I just experienced it. So much so, I just started to weep. I had to pull off the freeway, went up off ramp. I just wept and wept for both these situations. And then I got it out, took a deep breath, went back in the freeway, got to the church that I was doing the service for, went in the bathroom, washed my face, did the service, went home, hugged all my kids, but I'm good to go. And so you can engage those, but I can choose when I'm engaging those experiences. When you can't separate out, one of two things happens. Where people separate completely from the feelings, and maybe you've had a physician or a doctor. You know, sometimes physicians deal with so much pain every day, especially like in oncology, working with cancer patients. Every day they're giving bad news or good news. And sometimes physicians cope by separating humanity. They don't see people's humanity at all. That's not good, because the compassion disappears. You're just an object. That's where the term pragmatism comes in, where they're just dealing matter of fact. In the military, this happens. Sometimes people have lost buddies, and one after another, and they learn I can't get close to anybody, so I have no friends. I'm not letting you in my life. I don't want to feel this pain. So we create that kind of pragmatism, a barrier. Now, overly sympathetic and overly pragmatic deals with kind of an apathy for the pain of others. You just get overwhelmed. It's keeping that place of balance. Now, compassion fatigue. There's many aspects that contribute to that emotional drain. You have this, I'm not going to read to you, but you know, there are different elements. It's just going, engaging emotions, you're draining to the point where you just can't keep up. Decreased energy, you go, and finally you just hit the wall and you stop, okay? Kind of a good metaphor for, you know, that kind of, I just can't go on anymore. You know, some of the signs and symptoms, sensing guilt, distress, irritable, short-tempered at times. It's just emotionally, I'm raw and I'm wearing out. You'll find yourself saying, I need a vacation, I need a break, I need some time off. Now, compassion fatigue, that emotional engagement, you take a break, I'm good to go. You go on a little vacation, you get back at it, you're fully engaged. Now, burnout is, you know, I'm drained, where I take a vacation, you get back after 2 weeks off, and within a few hours, you're like, I need another vacation. Yeah. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Now, there's other elements to burnout, to that's there, but it's where I need more than a vacation. Sometimes it's counseling. Sometimes I need to go to a retreat center and get some time to really undo some of the pressures that have been there, or readjusting, reorganizing a life. When you're go, again, sometimes you just reach this place where, like, I just can't sleep. Or some people sleep too much, wherever they are, you know. And I know that really stinks, but disparity between, you know, a disparity of, you know, managing life is overwhelming. So you have these elements. Now, here's a kind of a picture metaphor of burnout, okay? It's where the load, the emotional load now is so heavy, I can't move forward. I can't get out of it. I need help. I need someone to help bear the load. Now, there are different stages of burnout for anxiety, panic, feeling overwhelmed, agitated, from the fight stage to the flight stage, where you start to withdraw from people, absenteeism, lax at work, to finally the freeze stage, where I'm burnout, cortical inhibition. Again, the brain is not functioning, is starting to shut off certain function, can't remember names, not good with numbers, I'm just disconnecting at times. Moral compromise becomes part of that, you know, sinkhole syndrome, where it just collapses. You know, I've kept things going on the surface, now I'm in this place of brokenness. People irresponsible risk-taking. People start thinking of self-harm, or taking, over-abusing medication or drinking to medicate what they're going through. So at this moment, what I want to do is ask you to take a piece of paper. I want you to either fold it in half twice, or just draw a box like this on your paper. And I want you to have 4 little compartments. And in each of the 4 compartments, I'm just going to have you do a simple little exercise. I want you to put your top priorities, 1 in each of the boxes. By priority, I mean, maybe your marriage is a top priority, or maybe your cat is a top priority, maybe your career, your job, or your faith. Maybe your physical exercise routine, maybe it's your car. You love your car, it's a top priority to you. Or your education, what you're going your degrees? What are your top priorities in life? Only list 4, one in each of those quadrants, one in each of them. Now, let's imagine now life gets busy and you're in the midst of graduate school. You have so many demands. You have a final all of a sudden, and you have to cut some things out. And so as you look at those 4, let's imagine you just don't have time to do everything. So what are you going to take time from? Go ahead, cross out one of the 4. One of the 4. What has to go as far as time? Well, I have some bad news. In the midst of this season, you have a family member who actually, it's a life or death situation. They're hospitalized. Life for you is just, it's about ready to stop. You have to just focus on just the essentials. Your schedule can't do everything, and you want to be with your loved one. So cross out one more. What's the next thing you would cross out? And I know this is difficult, I was doing this with a small group once, and we were looking at priorities, and a woman had put her faith, her marriage, her children, her job. And so right away, what's the priority go? She crossed out her job. It's like, I'm going to focus on my family. And then I said, one more has to go. And she was looking at her faith, her marriage, or her children. And she leaned over to her husband and said, I'm sorry, honey, the kids need me. You got to go. And so she crossed him out. He was like, what? That wasn't. So that's not my intent. I don't want to cause any marriage problems here. Now, what did you end up with? Share it with your neighbor. If you're watching this, just what are the 2 that are left? For a lot of people, it's going to be their faith and family, their faith in their marriage, their faith in their children. Now, what I just did, I just had you prioritize in a real simple way, which you do every day. Every one of you does this on an ongoing basis. Every day you wake up, you have priorities, you rearrange your schedule. The fact that you're in this class, right now, you had to make decisions that took you away from family. And so you actually crossed out family to participate on a day off. You're here today. Short term, that we do that. The challenge is when short term becomes long term. When, next week I'll get to my son's game. Next week comes. Well, next week I'll be there. And the emergencies keep coming up. We keep saying yes to everything. And that sinkhole gets bigger and bigger and bigger because we're not prioritizing right. There's a well-known book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. This is one of his principles. Learn how to put the big things in our priority first and then work everything else around them. In emergency service as chaplains, there's so many needs, so much brokenness, so much pain, and you're needed. But you still need to maintain the priorities of your self-care, your own relationship with God, your own relationships with family. And so we have in the fire department in San Diego I work with, we have a concept called the 4 Fs. It really comes from Coach John Wooden. Our fire chief was mentored by John Wooden a number of years ago. And he had the 3 Fs, faith, family, friends. And our chief at the time really made it a culture in the department to make sure your faith, family, and friends are well cared for. Because then the 4th F was fire department. And that the fire department will have healthy employees. And then the 5th F became funding. We were broke at a time as a city, and so those priorities keep adding to us. So, compassion fatigue versus burnout. I still care versus I don't care anymore. Physical drain versus spiritual or emotional separation, where we kind of break apart. Take a temporary break versus I need more than a break. You have over-engagement versus disengagement, where you just start to disconnect from people. So another little exercise. Here's what I want you to do. You have this list of virtues. I want you to think about your life. How would you like to be remembered? What's the legacy? What would you want to be known by? If you could choose one virtue on this list that at the end of your life, this is what people would talk about you. It would be how you are known. It's your reputation. What would that be? If you could choose one, go ahead. What would you choose? Circle it. Now Solomon, in the Hebrew Scriptures, Solomon made a choice like this. And what was his choice?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. He chose wisdom. Now there are other great virtues. Probably many of you chose love, or friendship, integrity, being a person of their word. All of those are great virtues. And so I'm sure all of you chose wisely. Now, let me reword the question. What is media, Hollywood? What does our culture say? These are the top virtues to live for. What are they?
Wealth,
fame,
success,
power. Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
We're bombarded for these other choices that really lead to short-term pleasure, in a sense, or exalting the self versus the long-term character virtues. Well, what happens when someone's burnt out? They often start to compromise long-term virtue for the short-term escape, short-term compromise. When you hear about someone who has done so much good and all of a sudden they've been misusing funds, they're broken relationships, family is broken apart, often their priorities got displaced, or just the drain of life, the pressures of life, they started making bad choices. Or ego gets in there, the entitlements that can come from pastors, like this little cartoon. From now on, we're going to operate on a theocracy, and I'm Theo, okay? Such a dangerous place to think that life revolves around you, or you as a chaplain versus keeping God central in everything. Now, let me point out, Focus on the Family has so many great resources for clergy, for chaplains, for pastors. I encourage you, ever you need resources, just training resources for self-care, or a counselor, or a retreat center that provides support. They have listings all over the country, and they actually have funding. They have scholarships that they make available for clergy, chaplains that are going through difficult times. I know I've referred a number of clergy leaders who are going through a difficult time, struggling in their own marriage. They had scholarships to send them to a care facility where they spent several days in a live-in where they're working through their challenges. Wonderful ministry. And there's actually retreat centers all over the country that offer free weekend stays for clergy, for chaplains, for pastors. They're available. So it's a great helpline that's there. But really, what kind of as a simple metaphor, as chaplains, we emotionally, we are giving a lot of ourselves in service to others. But if you're not replenishing at the same level, if not more, then you're giving out. Eventually, that depletion takes place. What fills your bucket? What fills you up? What drains you? It's important to get a grasp of these different elements, the things that you're made for. For me, repetitive, menial tasks just that drives me nuts. I need to engage people. I need to be with people. Task, it doesn't fill me up. I'm naturally an introvert. I like solitude. I like to be away from the crowds. I have to engage crowds and serving in those elements. But what fills you up? For me, I love taking walks. I love to exercise. I love to read. My wife and I, we love family dinners. I love more intimate settings with meals, and family time for me is crucial. And so some of the things that we can do to fill us back up, you have this list: spiritual renewal, little getaways, retreats, sharing the leadership responsibility, delegating to others. So you have these lists of suggestions of things to do for self-care. These are coping choices to do to deal with some of the pressures of life. Now, in stress management, we have the R's of stress management: responsibility, establish your priorities, set boundaries, learn to say no, and so keeping perspectives to reflection. Know what's affecting you. Know the signs and symptoms. You're getting sick frequently. You're having headaches. You're just anxious. No, you need to have self-awareness where you need a break. There's times where I'm going, and I'm starting to forget things and miss appointments, and I realize I need to slow down. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm starting to miss things because I'm over-engaged. Then you have elements of relaxation. You know, sometimes just do nothing. Make sure to take a Sabbath. Do things that replenish you emotionally. And then the relationships you're involved in. Make sure relationships are invested in. Now, my real name, just so you know, my real name that I go by with my grandchildren is Papa, okay? Even though I'm Dr. Stonier, they know me as Papa. And just so you know, I'm their favorite, okay? My granddaughter, when she was 2 years old, her birthday, you know, we had a big extended family birthday party, and my daughter woke her up from her nap, and so we're all there in the family room, and she has this on video, and we didn't know it at the time, but when she woke up, my daughter said to her daughter, said, "Kennedy, your family's here for your birthday." And she wakes up a little sleepy. She's got her blankie over her head. She says, "Is Papa here?" She goes, "Yeah, Papa's here." And Grammy, she says, "I love Papa." Well, Papa's here, and other goes through the family. I just want Papa, you know. Now, when I saw the video, I changed my will. She gets it all, you know. Stole my heart. Well, she comes down the steps with her mom and into this room filled with all the extended family, and I'm across the room, and she looks across the room, everyone's there, and she reaches her arm up and goes, "Papa!" You know, I very humbly kind of picked her up, you know, but, you know, it's family. For me, family time just fills me up. I can just sit and watch my family in that environment. I just love the connection. And in fact, here's my granddaughter, little Kennedy. And I just want to tell you how smart she is. At 2 years old, I'm not even making this up, on her own, she asked for her mother's phone, cell phone, and she texted me. Her mother didn't help her at all. 2 years old, she texted, "I love you, Papa." In fact, here it is right here. I got this text on my daughter's phone. I was like, "What is that?" So I called her up. And she said, "Kennedy wanted to tell you she loved you," and so she texted all in her own. "I love you, Papa." So it's a different translation. You kind of get the idea. Routines. As you know, homeostasis. It's trying to keep that sense of balance, returning to normalcy, you know, get outside accountability over your schedule, refueling, eat right, hydrate, exercise. Now you've got to be careful. Sometimes exercise can be harmful. I believe you're laughing at Okay. A little fun in the midst of everything. You know, sometimes, you know, hey, we get a little out of shape, and I got to get back into shape, and we overdo it. So remember, we got to do things in steps, keeping life balance, and staying consistent in those things. So also retraining is another of the stress management, ongoing education, dealing with self-care, time management, prioritizing are all beneficial. So much written on the subject for managing ourselves and our own energy. And then recreation, learning to laugh in these things, have fun, enjoy life, taking vacations. Now, another way to look at these elements, we can organize them by what, to avoid additional exposure to stress, creating those boundaries. So you have some of those elements that are listed there. And then reappraisal. That's where counseling comes in, journaling, writing out what I'm thinking. Now, here you go. What Roman numeral is this?
9.
9, Roman numeral 9. Now, you learn Roman numerals like when you're 10 or 11 years old. What is 5?
V.
It's a V. What's 50? L. What's 100? C. A C note is a $100 bill. What's 1,000? M. What's N? I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Okay, here's your task. Write Roman numeral 9 on your paper. And here's what you get to do is I want you to either add a line or remove a line or part of a line and change 9 into 6. It's actually possible. Just add a line. Okay, well, I'll help you. I'll give you the solution here. There. I changed 9 into 6. Okay, I only added one curved line. Now, yes, I tricked you. Well, what I did is I purposely had you think narrow-minded. I conditioned you to think about within the paradigm of Roman numerals. And then when I gave you this task, you're limited in your perspective. And that's where sometimes counseling or talking to another person can come alongside us because they can see outside the box often, a paradigm shift, or what's called cognitive reframing, getting another perspective and another point of view of how to see these challenges that are going on. Now, other things to do is techniques to reduce stress arousal. That's some of the hobbies and things we can do that to kind of help you cope with what you're dealing with. And then finally, to ventilate, the catharsis, exercise, some of those elements are good to deal with stress. Now, all stress management really reduces down to these 4 things. You have 4 choices. You either remove the stressor out of your life, or you change your perspective of how you view the stress, or 3, you strengthen your coping resource of how to counteract that stress, or number 4, you remove yourself from that stressful situation or environment. Really, everything we do has those 4 elements as we take care of ourselves. Or if you're there to help somebody else going through hardship, these are things to consider as you guide them and help them make certain choices of what they're dealing with. Now, I was doing a training for our 911 supervisors, and so they had me come in for a 1-hour just stress management. It was a time where we're understaffed and a lot of pressure, and so the battalion chief had me come in. I'm working with all the supervisors. The next day, one of the lead supervisors quit. And when they interviewed, "What are you doing?" she said, "Well, it's the presentation the chaplain did convinced me I need to quit." So the chief contacts me, "What did you do? You're supposed to help us." So I met with her, and she thanked me. She goes, and this was the concept, that she can't eliminate the stress. No matter how she views it, it's still there. She has done everything she can to cope, and she felt like it was killing her, so she realized, I need to get out of this. she got out of that environment. She had already been thinking about it, but it was that kind of that step that really helped her move past this. Now, great decision on her part. Didn't help the rest of the supervisors because now their workload increased till they got her replaced. They promoted somebody to that position. You know, we need to be active in self-care, making those choices, being accountable to do the right thing. Now for me, this is where I go on a regular basis. You know, when I'm stressing on a real regular basis, I like to go here. I sit in front of my screensaver and I just stare at it.
You're a mess.
Now it'd be nice to have the resource to say, you know, weekend, this is where I go, but I don't have that kind of a resource. But my encouragement is to create those environments in your life. So for me, I grew up in Southern California. Beach, water sports, that's just in my blood. 4 generations in Southern California. And my son in our backyard, he said, Dad, this area here, let's put a beach in. And so that's my backyard. We put a beach in our backyard. Now people say, where do you live? I tell people I have beachfront property. I have beachfront property. I just walked 6 steps out of my back door and my feet are in sand. Now I live miles from the beach, but I'll just say, you know, in the spring, summer, no, in Southern California we can do this. Other parts of the country maybe not so much. But you know, my family, you know, after dinner we'll go outside, we'll put a fire in the fire ring and roast marshmallows or have a cup of coffee and we decaf and just sit out there. And that's amazing. When you're barefoot, your feet in sand, the stars are out, and you're sitting around a fire, it's like you're in a different world. And you talk and you have conversation, you poke the fire. For me, it's just a fun environment. Now, my wife's not as happy because when the grandkids are over, they're in and out of the beach, and then sand goes all through the house. So we have to always wash their feet and some of these elements. Now, let me warn you, in one of my presentations, a chaplain loved this idea, and they put a beach in their backyard. It's not expensive at all, sand's pretty cheap. They did a beautiful beach with palm trees, but in their neighborhood, they have a lot of cats. And so they were actually upset with me. They came to me and said, thanks a lot. I just spent several $100s for a litter box in my backyard. So, you know, that's not for everyone. Now, let me point out, there is what is in research referred to as the awe factor that helps bring the counteracting of stress hormones, the endorphins, the connections with other people. Awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast or beyond human scale that transcends our current understanding of things. It's putting yourself in environments that just are soothing to the soul, that promote prayer. It's being out in creation, enjoying the beauty. Now, where I live, we love sunsets, and I love walks on the beach. And maybe you live in a part of the country where going up in the mountains or out into the desert. I love the desert country as well. Just the beauty or just the awe, looking out into space and the beauty of all that God has created. Now, awe binds us together, helps us see things in a new way. It makes us, nicer, happier. It elevates mood. Alters our bodies to reduce potential depression and potential healing factors. Now you have the research article that on this slide to do some further study on this, to put yourself in those environments. Now, biblical stress management. Here's the great scripture in the Message. It's a paraphrase. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Jesus said, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Learn, I love this phrase, the unforced rhythms of grace I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. You know, as you reflect on this, Jesus says, come to me, all you that labor or heavy laden.
I will give you
I
rest.
will give you rest. It's his rest, his presence, which comes from spending a lot of time with him, just daily. Though the outward man is aging, perishes, the inward person can be renewed day by day. And so as we finish, there's just some scriptures on some of the personal self-care that we have in the scriptures. The importance of prayer as biblical stress management, the reading of scripture, daily renewal, capturing your thought life, being in part of community, family. You have to bear one another's burdens. You also have the kind of the aspects of gratitude, being thankful. You know, though sleep is actually a gift from God, and to get into a regular pattern where you're resting and taking Sabbath. Now, exercise profits a little. Godliness is profitable unto all things, but exercise is still important in how we manage some of the stresses, and as well as joy and humor. And then finally, forgiveness, and then waiting, soul rest, and the healing that comes from God.